Hello and welcome to this morning session. I'm Dave Minassian. I'm one of the product managers here at Microsoft 365. I drive a lot of the SharePoint and OneDrive admin experiences across the board, and also many things within Microsoft 365 as well. So today I'm here to talk to you about SharePoint admin space and all the new stuff that is coming to the space, and also how the Copilot kind of is, how we're looking to integrate the Copilot into the SharePoint area. Before we get started, I want to really quickly set the scene a little bit, and some of this information you've already might have seen before throughout the conference, but I do want to kind of call this out in the kind of with the admin perspective. First of all, you probably have heard the world is changing. There are lots of things that are changing around the ecosystem that we're operating in. The businesses are transforming. There's a big digitization effort that is happening across businesses. And all this is generating a lot of content, a lot of data, right? So just in Microsoft alone, we have 2 billion data points or documents that are generated every day. That's around 83 million per hour, right? So it's a huge, vast number of documents that are coming in. And majority of these documents are unstructured. Because it's unstructured data and there's a lot of it, the traditional ways that we've been managing data is no longer kind of efficient or it's no longer okay to continue. New solutions are needed. Businesses also spend around $59 billion managing the data, right? And storing the data. And the reason they're doing this is because, partly at least, much of the architectures that the businesses operate in is very complex. So it's very hard to be data-driven, right? To figure out what you need, what you don't need. So businesses end up, saving everything, right? And they're looking at either building custom solutions to manage all this, or they're relying on different services, cloud services, to help them manage. This number is a kind of an important number because, it's kind of a result of having a lot of data that you are not necessarily able to manage efficiently, which results in, sometimes oversharing, different data breaches, etc. Right? The data that is getting generated and the documents, content that is getting generated is actually a competitive advantage for businesses that can actually manage it and use it. So Microsoft and its customers used to rely on assumption that their data was safe because it was hard to find, right? So I could have lots of things shared with me, but if I don't know how to find it, if I don't know exactly what I'm searching for, it's going to be very hard for me to discover that data. Now, with AI tools like Copilot, that assumption is no longer valid because AI can discover and surface relevant data from large, complex data sets, right? And that's what it's designed to do, and it's fairly well, it's really good at doing that. So you need to shift your strategy on how you manage and govern your data using the tools designed to tackle that. And you need to be able to do that at scale and on continuous basis. Now, Microsoft now has a native suite. It's called SharePoint Advanced Management Suite, and it's designed to help you identify and control the sprawl, content exposure, and access across your tenant. And since this is a native capability suite, these capabilities within the suite are scalable, fast, and are most importantly supported by Microsoft. So if something goes wrong, you can call Microsoft support and resolve the issue that way, just like any other M365 product. Another thing that you might have heard is that SharePoint is the backbone for a lot of the collaboration across Microsoft 365. So regardless whether you're using OneDrive, Teams, Yammer, Viva, Sites, Lists, or anything else, where you're sharing documents and you're engaging with other users, it's backed usually by SharePoint. So that's a really important concept to understand, to really kind of understand why we're talking about management of Copilot and content from SharePoint. The Copilot is becoming a truly magical interface that connects content you have access to from across Microsoft 365. But it cannot differentiate what content you should have access to, okay? This is where governing content freshness, access, sharing becomes crucial for your organization to fully leverage the power of LLM and Copilot by preventing overexposure and oversharing of key content. Let's start by going over some of the most common things that admins do in SharePoint Admin Center. And then from there, we can talk about how these tasks become more efficient with SharePoint Advanced Management capabilities. So there are 4 general categories that admin tasks kind of fall into. That's monitor, detect, take action, and automate wherever possible. So much of these today are mostly done manually, or customers sometimes MacGyver different solutions. They put them together or use a whole bunch of different services to automate as much as possible, especially when we talk about scale. So let's take a scenario example here. So the company Contoso Outdoors is looking to onboard Copilot, and Kristen, the admin, has been asked to prepare the tenant for smooth deployment. Doing some research into how Copilot works, Kristen finds some information, official Microsoft information, like a guidance document that helps her kind of figure out what steps she needs to take to move forward. Now, that QR code takes you to that document that Kristen found. So the first step is identify and clean up your inactive content. So this is a really important step because Copilot can only see the information you have. So if you have a whole bunch of stale content, that's the content that the Copilot is going to be looking at, so it's going to obviously impact results as well. So the second part is, it's really important for your content to always have an owner, right? So this is a really big area because it's the most time-consuming area because it's hard to find owners for things that people don't know, are not interacting with sometimes even. The third step is identify potential over-permissioned content. So you could have a content with owners and everything else, everything is going fine, but if that content is over-permissioned, that's definitely a problem, especially in the Copilot, when you're deploying Copilot. And the fourth one is obviously working with the site owners and the content owners to clean all this stuff up, right? So those are the general 4 things that you want to do to kind of get ready for the Copilot deployment. Now, the traditional way of doing this, let's say the first step, is based on some customer conversations. They usually look at the active sites list. There's a column there called activity, right? And they look through that column, export the list, kind of search through and figure out the inactive sites, then identify the owner. And just that part alone, just the setup part, usually takes about 20 minutes per site, 15, 20 minutes or so, up to 30 minutes per site. And because you are targeting specific sites, because you're doing it manually, you have to really target the most, vital sites, right? So that takes a little bit extra to figure out. The second step is to work with the site owner, which could take anywhere from 2 to 4 days, or sometimes weeks. We've heard up to 2 months, sometimes depending on the site owner that you're dealing with, to really kind of work through all this. And so, in other words, the current method is really fine if you have like 10 sites, but if you have hundreds of sites, thousands of sites, and some of our customers have millions of sites, right? It's really not a scalable way of doing it. So you really need to have automated ways to deal with this, and quickly on ongoing basis. Before now, this is kind of what pushed a lot of customers to go and create their own solutions and have a mosaic of different providers for different features, et cetera. So that's that. Now, to help with this step, we have built an area called SharePoint, in SharePoint Admin Center, called Site Lifecycle Management, which is part of the SharePoint Advanced Management Suite. And this area is designed to help basically automate a lot of these tasks that Kristen was doing. we'll start with the inactive site policy here. So, by the way, this site lifecycle management area has two types of policies. It has inactive sites policy and site ownership policy. We'll start with the inactive sites policy and we'll go to the others. So the benefits of this policy can include things like reduction in storage, freshness, obviously the search will become better in general, and as a result also the quality of Copilot results will become better as well. Now, if you remember my previous example, it took Kristen about 30 minutes or so, 20, 30 minutes to get through and figure out what she needs to, what's inactive, find the owner, etc., and then go and start following up with the site owner, which could take a couple of days. So based on conversations with many customers, it takes about overall throughout this whole period of time about 2 to 3 hours for an app to deal with an active site, right? That's around 4,000 minutes if you break it up, right? So now, with an active sites policy, can you guys guess how long it takes to? Obviously, it's going to be much more, efficient. But can you guys guess how long it takes to set up an active sites policy? Oh, 1 second with Copilot, yeah. So almost, so we'll get to the Copilot part, but Copilot is actually an interface of everything all the capabilities that are already available there. So Copilot is not gonna go create a new capability by itself, right? So you have to back that up. So we'll get to the Copilot part in a few minutes. So it generally takes, it's about 4,000 minutes for, admin to go and do like find policy and activity thing. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to set up a policy. And that policy works on your entire tenant. So it's not per site. So it will go through your entire tenant, and clean up, and start doing all these things. Like it'll identify the inactive sites, identify the site owner, connect with the site owner, work with the site owner to figure out if the site is needed or not, and then based on your configuration, will actually take the action that you wanted to make all automatically and then report back to you, right? So let me show you how this is done really quick. All right, so first Kristen will click on create a policy and read through the overview. Then she will use to define the scope of the policy by specifying the length of site inactivity, site type, creation source, and label that she wants to target, obviously. Then she will go ahead and configure the policy by specifying the recipient and customize the email that will be sent to the site owner. The email can now include a link to a page that defines the organization policy, and the logo will be automatically fetched behind the scenes. Next, she will need to define the sequential actions she wants the policy to take. Once the policy is activated, the site owner will receive up to 3 consecutive email attempts to get the resolution. And she can define the actions that the policy will take automatically if there is no response. So in this case, the first attempt is basically nothing happens. On the second attempt, the site goes into read-only mode. And on the third attempt, the site will automatically get archived. And now the site owner will actually have to open a ticket to get the site unarchived if they still need it. This happens over a 90-day period. So the site owner has plenty of time to get back and voice out whether they need it or not. Then she goes ahead and activates the policy to watch it and basically just kind of watch it go. Once the site owner responds, the admin report will be updated to basically let you know that, hey, the site owner responded, and then you can download that content, you can process it however you want to after that. By the way, it's important to note that you can have multiple consecutive policies running at the same time. So you can actually define scope and target scope for different types of sites, and you can define actions for different types of sites as well. Moving forward, all Kristen has to do is run the policy whenever she wants to. So if you guys want to do this, or if she wants to do this every quarter, she can just come in and click on and run the policy again, and every quarter the policy will just kind of run. So really, really cool functionality here. Now, you probably noticed when I talked about inactive sites policy, a lot of the interactions and actions are happening with the assumption that there's a owner, there's a site owner at the end. And you will find that the majority of content and security policies across Microsoft 365 rely on someone owning the content or someone owning the area that the policy is trying to work through. By the way, all the content starts with an owner, right? Because someone has to create the content. But over a period of time, the owners can move around. They sometimes leave the organization. Sometimes there is a reorg and ownership kind of the organization and content changes. And so the content basically becomes ownerless usually in those ways. Even if the content is ownerless, it is important that Copilot is still going to be able to access it. People are still using it, etc. So it's important to have someone that is managing it. So for an admin like Kristen, this is even a bigger challenge than in active sites because she would not be able to fully complete the prep unless she actually goes and makes sure that all the content has owners and it's actually it's actually like the content is being managed actively. For some of our customers that I talked to, they've been doing this for about 2 years in their tenant, so it's a very large tenant. So they've been doing this manually and through all sorts of different solutions, right, for 2 years, and it's an ongoing process, right, because new content gets created, new reorgs happen, content moves around. So this is something that you have to do on a continuous basis. It's not just like you did it once and that's it, right? So the new site ownership policy is our answer to this problem, right? Which helps you quickly automate the task of ensuring that all sites have an owner, whether it's a classic sites, communication sites, group sites, team sites, whatever. I'll show you this in just a second, but one thing I do want to also call out is that the site ownership can be slightly different, or the ownership of the content can be slightly differently defined in different organizations, and we're going to talk about how we're handling that as well here. Similar to the inactive sites policy, Kristen will start with site ownership policy by specifying the scope, which includes the site type, creation source, label, whether or not she wants to include the sites under retention or exclude any specific sites. Next, she will need to identify the role that owns the content. Traditionally, site owner is the role, but there are customers that delegate that role to site admins sometimes. So you can do that here as well. So Kristen follows the advice, then she selects the owner nomination logic. In this case, there are two available choices, which are the manager of the previous owner and the most active users. Then she proceeds to customize the email and decides on action, in this case, no response. Since this is a pretty impactful policy, Kristen decides to first run the policy in a simulation mode that will give you the report of ownerless sites without taking the action. So in the inactive sites policy, we actually activated the report, or the policy. Here, we're just running it in simulation mode so you can see the different experiences. So depending on the size of the problem, Kristen might want to set up a tenant-wide educational campaign to set user expectations before activating the policy, right? So, because once the policy is activated, all the site owners are going to start getting notified. Users might get notified, so you need to kind of set the expectations before that notification goes out. So now Kristen reduced her content governance footprint and has made sure that all the content has an owner. She can shift focus to identifying and dealing with overshared content using the new DAG access governance reports and capabilities, and we'll talk about those in just a second. So DAG reports are designed to consolidate all the available data around sharing, sensitivity, permissions, access, to really outline patterns that indicate oversharing, along with associated actions that help you take back the control of the content that you have. Okay, so let's see how that's done. So again, as usual, Kristen will start with creating the report and identifying the scope, which includes type, privacy, sensitivity, etc. Kristen will select, in this case, the report that covers all sites, folders, and lists, where everyone except external user group was given access. The use of the EEU group is one of the most common ways to for content to become overshared. So that's why we're targeting this specific report. Okay, so let's say the report shows up here. We can see that there are about 10 sites with around 100 items that were shared with everyone. Some of these sites have lots of e-signed documents which indicate contracts or other important documents. And we see that some of the sites are private and top secret, but they have been shared with the EU group, and they have and the external sharing is on. So this is something definitely Kristen needs to be worried about as an admin, because this is basically indicates that the content is potentially overexposed, and it could be open for Copilot to overexpose it even more. So now what? So what should the Kristen do? So this is a great report, but then the next thing that she can do is actually activate the site access review, which is a new action that we have within DAG reports. And what this will do is essentially will identify the site owner, automatically contact the site owner, and the site owner will basically get a notification. They will be able to click on that notification within the email, and we'll take them to this custom or new area where they can actually manage their files, right? And these files, so the sites sometimes can have thousands of files on them. I have sites that have multiple thousands of files in the site. This report will show you only the files that meet the criteria of the configuration that the admin set up. So these are the files that will be basically shared with the EU group, and not necessarily everything else under the sun. So that gives me a short list of things that I need to go and correct versus look through my thousands of files. So that's an important part. Now, DAG reports, it's a huge area for us. Every single customer that I talk to, oversharing is a big area that they're looking to solve. So these combinations of tools help you kind of minimize your governance footprint and then identify overshared sites and then take actions on those. And we're actually going ahead and enhancing that even further, right? So we're raising, increasing the list of items that the DAG report can identify from 10,000 to 1 million, for example. So if you have a large organization, it will handle all your everything that you have there. We're extending this to OneDrives as well. So far we've been talking about SharePoint. So OneDrive is the other part where you have content. So we will actually now be able to do these reports and actions on OneDrive as well. So some customers have custom implementations and solutions in their organization. We're going to enable you to use PowerShell now, and we're going to open those up for you to integrate with as well and automate things as you see fit. So scheduling is another thing, right? So you might want to run this report at a certain cadence. So you'll be able to schedule these reports to automatically run as often as you'd like. Access review that I just mentioned, site access review, is coming to all the DAG reports. Right now, it's specifically available in preview for that EU report, but it's going to be coming, it's in the process of rolling out to all the different reports as well. And then finally, and this is a big one, we're building a permission state report that you'll be able to essentially say things like, I want a list of sites that have over 1,000 people with access to that site, right? And we'll go through your entire tenant and pull that list. Okay, so I just talked about some of the available tools to help Kristen to get prepped and get ready and be really 10x her ability to get ready for Copilot adoption. Let's now talk about what happens after the adoption. So let's say she already went through everything, and now there's Copilot. As you guys know, Copilot is Microsoft is integrating Copilot into everything under the sun. So administration is not an exception. So we are bringing Copilot into admin spaces in general, and definitely SharePoint as well. Okay, so this integration in Admin Center will start with skills that help you find features you need, recommend actions, and streamline tasks. Shortly after that, we'll bring cross-admin capabilities, right? While respecting your existing organizational boundaries, including RBAC, including your roles, right, in your organization. So if you, for example, are a SharePoint admin and a team admin, you might be able to do tasks across and streamline wherever you are, right? You can do it from wherever in the admin center as you are. You don't have to be in Teams or in SharePoint. So there are 4 big pillars that we have as far as when we think about Copilot for admin. There are 4 things that we want to enable you to do here. There's actually many, many more, but we're starting with 4. So first is help and guidance. Can we help you get assistance in the flow of work based on the trove of public information that we have available to you? Second is commanding. When prompted by admins, can we execute tasks on their behalf? The next is a more of a quantum leap for us, which we're preparing for, is troubleshooting. Can we not just look at public documentation, but also tenant data, right? To help you fix common issues that you have, sometimes even preemptively, right? And the final one is search. Can we use natural language to help you find, filter, and sort across your tenant, right? So you can actually bring different parts of the information together kind of just by asking the Copilot to do it versus doing it in Excel or in some other place. So before we get into the demos, one thing I do want to note is that so Copilot for admins will come with certain functionality that you have access to today. If your tenant is enabled for SharePoint Advanced Management, or short for SAM, you are going to get a slew of other commands and data connections, etc. And I'll give you a slide towards the end to show you all the different new things that you will be getting over a period of time. I do want to call out that this is something that we're building, and it's coming in. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what we're building. So you're not going to be able to do this today necessarily. This one is basically it's the demo for SharePoint Admin Center. So here we're basically asking the Copilot to consolidate in a CSV all your tenant settings. Okay, so Copilot's actually going through and bringing in all your tenant settings. It can be things like, it's a tenant settings not just in the UX, but also PowerShell, also Graph APIs, like any kind of settings that are impacting that you can actually control as a SharePoint admin. Then we're asking the Copilot to actually look at that list and analyze and assess whether we're exposed for oversharing. Copilot basically behind the scenes is using advanced AI insights to really kind of go through and analyze the settings and figure out, hey, is there any exposure there? And you guys can see there's 3 things that it's recommending. So it saw that one of the things is that this organization has EEU enabled in their tenant, and the Copilot is basically saying, hey, you probably need to look at things that are enabled, like things that are already impacted in your organization that have EEU, and also go and maybe close that gap, right? And gives you instructions on how to do that as well. So in this case, Kristen, the next step was basically Kristen is asking, okay, well, what is exposed, right? So now I know that there are things that in my tenant that are open, and now I'm going to go in and give me a list of sites that are exposed. Copilot at that point is going in and automatically accessing the DAG reports. If you don't have an active DAG report, it will run a new DAG report and then take you to the list of sites that the DAG report was identified. And then the final step that is getting outlined here is that Kristen has also asked the Copilot to, hey, once you identify the DAG report, I need the top 10 sites from that DAG report to be, you need to initiate basically access review on those top 10 sites. And that's what it's doing here. So you can see how using Copilot, you don't actually necessarily need to know anything about the features. You don't need to know about, really not have any background. You can just come to the SharePoint Admin Center and say, hey, I'm trying to deal with oversharing. tell me what do I need to do. And it's going to go in and find the content that you need. It's going to take the actions that you need. It's going to take you to the features that you need to know about, any reports that you need to run, and kind of give you guidance and also help you do those things as well for you. So this next scenario is essentially Kristen is trying to offboard. So she was told to offboard Cameron, who is one of the employees that is not working at the company anymore. So the Copilot is actually going in and, so then she's using the Copilot to actually go in and start that offboarding process. So she's asking here. So so the Copilot basically confirms that, hey, is this the person that you mean? Once yes, it accesses the organization's offboarding process. And then the next thing is it asks, hey, do you want me to start this process for you? So the first thing that it does, so the Kristen basically says yes. The first thing it does, it basically goes and resets, blocks access for Cameron to enter into the tenant, resets the password, and then basically transfers the content that Cameron had to Cameron's manager, and it's all happening automatically. The Copilot is doing it on Kristen's behalf here, and then basically Cameron is removed from the license. The Cameron's user account is deleted. And now at the end, the Copilot basically says, hey, now I have one license available. Do you want me to assign it to someone in your organization? So all that basically is done within 2 minutes, just by simply just asking the Copilot. Now, all these things that you've seen, so that magenta colored dot is where we are at the moment. So right now we have about 100 customers that are testing and kind of working with the admin Copilot. The next thing is going to be integration into some of these experiences that we talked about as far as with different admin centers. So right now, this is happening in the Microsoft 365 primary admin space for like the generalist admins. The next thing is going to be more specialist admins, which is going to be SharePoint, Admin Center, Teams Admin Center, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to start connecting these together. And eventually, you'll be able to just ask the Copilot again with natural language to do a specific task. The Copilot will go identify the tasks that you need to do or things that need to be done, and then start executing them on your behalf. Now, I promised you that I'm going to show you a whole list of things that are coming with SharePoint Advanced Management. We're again going to cover SharePoint Advanced Management tomorrow in much more detail. So this list is this list, and also this list. Are all the features that are going to be available for SharePoint Advanced Management, and they're actually in a process of they're either in previews or they're in a process of going into a preview and rolling out. So, and all these features are eventually going to get converted into commands and data connections, where the Copilot will be able to access that data and we'll be able to reference that data when it's responding to your questions. Now we have a few minutes to answer any questions. If you guys have any questions, I'm all ears.
Yeah, my question was, what license do you need to get the SharePoint admin?
SharePoint Advanced Management?
Advanced Management,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a SharePoint Advanced Management license. it's a SKU. So it's called SharePoint Advanced Management Plan 1. So it's available in the marketplace. It's $3 per user per month, but depending on your organization, you might have, you will have to connect with your account folks at Microsoft, et cetera, and see if there's something special for you, right? But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Yes, there's one more question. No, so this is for all your users. So that's an important note. Thank you for asking that. It is for all your users because majority of the functionality, they're initiated by the admin, but they're actually going to all your users. So you have to be able to manage all yours. And the other thing is, if you just licensed 1 or 2 users or 30% of your users and not others, just imagine being able to manage that. Like if we will have to go and check the license every time we're sending out, site access review or anything to, so you'll be able to only manage like part of their tenant, which doesn't make sense. Yes.
I'm not sure this is the right session, but my question, since we're talking about SharePoint Admin Center, is when will we be able to manage our Loop workspace sites in the SharePoint Admin Center?
That's a great question. So as far as the Loop administration is concerned, that is something we're working with the Loop team. It is not here yet, but that is something in process. So I don't have a date for you, unfortunately, that I can share at the moment. But it is something that we're working through.
Don't shoot the messenger, but what about subsites?
What about what? Subsites?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So subsites right now are part of site libraries, right? Site collections. And a lot of these things are managed at a site collection level, not at a subsite level. So we are kind of moving away from that whole pattern, right, of the subsites and site collections, and we're moving towards more hubs. There is still some management, so all these things that I mentioned will apply to all the classic sites, all the site collections, but we're not going as deep as the subsites at the moment. Any other questions? Yes.
Two questions from my side.
Yep.
One is it's a very common policy that you should have two owners at least.
Yes.
For a site.
Yep.
But there's no option to set that. So to give the users a guideline to name the second owner anywhere, either in SharePoint nor in M365 groups. Is that planned?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in the policy that I just mentioned, if you run that policy and you just say, hey, I want to have two owners from the admin side, we will actually go in and identify sites that don't have two owners and then find another owner.
But then it already
happened. From
happened.
the site level, right? Like
from the creation process.
Yeah. So from the user standpoint, that is something that we have, so we have a separate team that is dealing with that. We have notified them. It is something that they know about, and they're working through that. I don't have any specific dates, or I know that it's a known thing that we want to bring into the experience. Yes.
And the second question, it's all about the tools as well. So you say, okay, we will have tools to check if something is overshared. But once again, the best choice would be that it's not possible to overshare it. For example, to have individual rights to share a photo or any document for each member in the site. So there is an option that you can set.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to come to tomorrow's session.
Okay.
We're going to talk about restricted access controls, where you can actually basically close off regardless of who the content is shared with or who shares with whom, you can actually close it off to a specific set of users or specific groups, right? And you can actually control the sharing that way.
On site level?
Or at a site level, yeah.
With them.
And that's also control for Copilot as well. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. So that's a really big, important area that we'll talk about. Yep.
So how does it work with private channels out of Teams? Because as we know, it considers its own site as a private channel. But when you go to SharePoint admin, it doesn't see it as its own site. It sees it as an actual sub-site. Not truly. So how does that work with that?
So private channels or special channels, I want to say, are just sites.
Right.
So like we deal with them just like any other site.
So the system can actually differentiate it, because when you go into SharePoint admin console now, if you pull up a site that actually has a private channel, it doesn't show it as a separate site. It shows it as a sub-site.
Yeah.
So this system can recognize that?
Yeah, in fact, in our admin center, we have a column where you can find the site and then the main team site. And then you can actually go in and see all the channels associated with it. So it's in our list, right? So anything that is in our list, we're able to run through all these policies on.
Okay.
My question really is, for the first three policies that you showed us,
is that available to just regular SharePoint admins, or do we have to have the advanced?
The SharePoint admin is basically a role that gives you access into SharePoint Admin Center. So all these policies are within SharePoint Admin Center, but they are part of the SharePoint Advanced Management SKU. So you have to be, your tenant has to have that SKU enabled, and then you as a SharePoint admin will see that. We'll see them automatically. I love the questions, by the way. Please keep them coming.
Is there a way in whether it's Copilot or from the SharePoint Premium side, to see what SharePoint sites are currently using Power Automation?
So that's a good question. As of right now, no. We don't have that capability, but that's a great feedback point. And we have Sasha here that could help me maybe answer. I don't have a mic, but you can take mine here. Do you want to take mine here?
So, great question. In SharePoint Admin Center today, it primarily focuses on sites and then perhaps users when it comes to the oversharing related sites, right? But we are looking into bringing what we call apps insights as well in SharePoint Admin Center, so that for each site, what are the third-party apps, including Power Automate flows, I think gentleman was asking, that are being instantiated, and what level of graph scope access that they have in the system, and how much traffic are they bringing to the site, things like that. So it is in our roadmap. I would say probably in the next 6 months, it will show up as well.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Yeah, right here.
Yep. I see there's another question here.
Can you hear me?
That's a great question. Yes. So that's another thing that is coming in this space. Yep.
You guys see something on screen that Copilot can access, not the screen, the screen. Copilot can access past versions of the document. Is that accurate? So the document.
Yes. So it would not be able to access all 10. I think it can access the most recent. So the just most recent version. Yeah, as far as I know, but I'll need to double check on that. You know the answer to that?
Okay. Great question. So the Copilot is at the back end, really uses the search index where the content is already indexed. And as you know today, what we index is the current version, latest version of the document. That's what it is there. In the future, we're also looking at, there are some scenarios we are getting into, such as we just finished one session on agreements, content solutions. Like if you have a high value document, you do want to keep all versions of the documents for the audit trail and things like that. In those cases, when you get into those ones and you have enabled those capabilities, then Search Index will have perhaps other versions of the documents too. Because Search Index has it, Copilot will have access to that as well. So as of now, what you said is, what understanding wise, just current version of the document. Okay. The simple way to think about Copilot is like search. It's like how search works today. Whoever has access to a document is the only one who will have access to through Copilot as well. Whatever Search Index version capabilities are, which is the current version of the document, that's what Copilot also will expose.
Yeah, the main difference is that with search, you have to know what you're searching for. With Copilot, you don't have to know what you're searching for. You can just give a topic and it will go in and find everything under the sun for you, right, that you have access to. Yep.
Say you've implemented your inactive sites policy and takes an action at the very end to archive the site. Does that site still become discoverable by Copilot?
No, so you will not. So it will not be discoverable by Copilot because it will be in archive. So Copilot and archive are not integrated. Yeah. 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 So we have a new archive, M365 archive, that is coming live, which basically it's cold storage essentially, right? It takes, there's actually a session tomorrow on that at 8 a.m. On archive and backup. So I would recommend going there to get all the details. Yep.
Two quick questions. I'll start with the, if I call it the easiest one. You mentioned that onboarding, process with Copilot. How does that work with a hybrid environment? How far Copilot can go on the task execution? What can it do for user objects saw that they're removing the license and all that kind of stuff. But like from the, NAD on-prem, is there any action that Copilot will take or?
From on-prem.
Yes, AD on-prem.
Yeah, so not as far as I know. So on-prem is like, I don't think we have Copilot in on-prem environment. It's all on the web, so it's all online.
Okay, so there's
Yep.
that. All right, so and then the second one. So from the migration perspective, like migrating files and folders from the file share to the SharePoint, do you guys have any tool like can facilitate this and make it like, a smooth migration inside the SharePoint?
Yeah, so we have a whole migration space. Like we have a lot of tools that are native Microsoft tools that you can use to migrate from one tenant to another, from different storage areas, to M365. Yep.
Will it in that identify the access, the ownership for those folders, and then migrate everything like as it is, or like you need to do some side work to?
You will need to do some side. You want to answer that one actually, as far as migration, whether all the permissions are migrated.
Is the question about the tenant-to-tenant migration, or you're talking just from folder?
File share migration, like the
Yeah.
classic one.
File share migration. So from file servers to OneDrive and SharePoint, like that migration.
Correct.
So you do have to manage permissions by yourself. So you need to, typically what I've seen is customers create the identity mapping files, right? And because the file server has a different user identities and permission for that, when you move them to OneDrive and SharePoint, that's in Azure Active Directory, identities has to be there. And then you tell us user A here is user B in the cloud in Azure Active Directory. We just use that identity mapping to permission in the cloud once the file is there in the cloud. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. We already have that syncing, like the syncing object between, but just the part like when all the folders and files move to SharePoint. So will that access remain the same as that it was to the on the file servers, or we need to do some extra work?
As long as, no, you don't have to do it. As long as that identity mapping file that you have given us and that map, because we just go off of that identity mapping, right? This user A in the file server equals user B in the cloud. If you've given us that one, it will take care of it. Permission will be set automatically for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you said, it would bring in PowerShell settings as well. All your settings. Can
any kind of APIs that you have.
Can Copilot then also set those settings?
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to PowerShell?
Yeah, so eventually, yes. So you will be able to kind of, we are really careful with PowerShell in general because today, actually, Copilot can write PowerShell script fairly well. It's about 80% good, right? But we are very careful not to enable that in the admin setting because there's a lot of admins that don't know PowerShell. So you don't want to do things unintentionally, right? So that's the only, there's a lot of work that needs to happen to make sure that these unintended things don't happen at a tenant level, right? But yes, eventually, if you know the exact command that you're in or exact thing that you want to invoke, eventually you'll be able to do that with Copilot without going to PowerShell. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
With Copilot on SharePoint admin management, humans make mistakes, and if something can be done within a few clicks away, if someone know that they made a mistake, if they need to revert the change, would Copilot be able to revert that correctly?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of change it happened, right? Like if a site was deleted. Yeah, so the question was if everything is like a quick click away. So what if something went wrong and you misclicked something? Can Copilot revert that? Was that the right answer? Okay. So the answer to that is it really depends on the action that you're taking. Some actions are final. Some actions you can definitely revert. So for example, site access review. Once the site access review is enabled on the site, there's no way to cancel it, right? Because it has already started, right? But if you deleted a site, you can restore it very quickly. If you archived the site, you can unarchive it right? So these type of things that it really depends. So hopefully that answers your question. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
I believe you had an earlier slide showing asking Copilot if there was any oversharing or something to that extent.
Yep.
That Copilot prompt, is that part of the SharePoint Advanced Management, or is that part of the Copilot SKU? Or
so
both?
The prompt portion, that conversation part, is part of Copilot. What it's accessing, which is the DAG reports and actually giving you actions, those are SharePoint Advanced Management actions. Without those, the Copilot doesn't have access to those, right?
And that Copilot, is that the Copilot for M365 SKU, or is that just part of the Admin Center?
So that's a great question. As of right now, we're expecting that to be as just part of the admin center. And when you get a Copilot, you get that. But they're still kind of maneuvering. Like we're still trying to figure out. There's still discussions happening, so it's not finalized. If it was up to me, I would personally, include that as part of the admin center. But there are lots of complexities around that, right? And also, the admin tasks are a lot more intense as far as the capacity and as far as resources are concerned versus regular user tasks, right? Just imagine you're running you're initiating a policy or you're analyzing a table with 1 million rows in it, for example, right? So that's much, much more capacity heavy item than just like asking the Copilot to read a document, right? Or something like that. So there are different things that are going to come into play, and this is partly why we're still in preview state. So hopefully, once we figure that out, everything will go a lot faster, and we'll get all these capabilities to you guys sooner.
Yeah. So my question is, on a regular Exchange admin, is there a report we can use to monitor a site that is putting a lot of files in it, and who are the users?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are the things that you're going to be able to do with Copilot. We have reports like the permission state report is going to have a column that looks at the number of files that are shared or that exist within that site, right? So Copilot can actually access that data source and give you that information from the Exchange Admin Center. So when we have that kind of cross-admin capabilities enabled that I was talking about earlier, you will be able to do that as long as you have access to SharePoint admin. So if you are Exchange admin and SharePoint admin, you will be able to invoke that report from Exchange eventually, or from wherever you are. Does that make sense? But we do have that is an ask that we have, and that is something that we're working towards. But permission state report within Advanced Management, SharePoint Advanced Management will have what you're asking for. Yeah, it's just not going to be through Copilot yet. It's just you have to run the report. Yep.
Hey, how can we see the private channel sites? Like in the active sites currently, it just shows the main sites, but it won't show the sites created by the private channels.
So it does actually. So now it includes all channels. So private channels, share channels, they'll be included in the list. So if you find the team, the main site, right, there is a column that says channels, right? So, and it will give you an enumeration of those channels for that site. So when you click on it, it will actually take you to a separate list that will have all the channel sites there. So it is part of the active sites space.
Is there any way that we can include everything in one place?
Not yet, but we're working on that. Yeah, it was designed based on a lot of feedback that customers gave, that they did not want to see all these channel sites, or all these private special channel sites in the main list, because you could have a lot of channel sites. And it would kind of dilute the things that or make it harder for them to find things. So that's why we included it as a separate list. However, we will eventually have the ability for you to do one way or the other. So you can switch off but those channel sites are part of, they're part of the list. So you can actually use PowerShell and just get a flat list if you want. Yeah.
And how about the my sites, the OneDrive sites?
Mhm.
It won't show up in the.
Not yet. So yeah. So that's the whole integration around OneDrive sites into SharePoint Admin Center. That's something that we have plans around, right? So we're going to bring in pretty much everything that you see for sites. You're going to also be able to see for OneDrives as well. Eventually, yeah. So that's we're kind of starting it out with all these reports, oversharing reports that are becoming also available for OneDrives. So a lot of these, kind of reports you can run on OneDrives as well, and eventually we'll have that whole OneDrive experience as well. Yeah.
This question is specific to our organization.
Mhm.
So we are planning to enable the external sharing,
Mhm.
but we only want to give the access only on the one site, just on the one site collection.
Mhm.
I mean, only on the one site.
On a specific site? Or?
Specific site.
Okay.
And after.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
So once we are enabling the external sharing going forward, whenever we are creating any new site, it is by default enabling it, and manually I need to get into the site and I have to say
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, so you're talking about external sharing specifically. Yeah, so right now it's on manual. You have to do it one by one for sure. There's no way to do that. You can use PowerShell to say, okay, these type of sites turn off external sharing versus turn it on. So you can automate it that way. But if you want to do it in UX, yes, you have to do it manually.
His question is, by default, SharePoint has external sharing turned on.
Yes.
And then you can manage individual sites to turn off.
Mm-hmm.
What he's asking is,
can you do the other way around?
Off for everything,
Yeah.
and then you can go manually turn on.
Yeah.
So you can,
yeah, makes sense. So, Sanjan, do you know the answer for that?
Our feature for external sharing is default on, but that doesn't mean every site is default on.
Yeah.
It's just a tenant level setting. So when you create a new site, if your tenant setting is turned on, the external sharing turned on, when you create the site, if you go and check the setting on the site, it is actually not turned on for the individual site. So you have to go and turn on. So you do not need to be afraid that by turning on external sharing, every site is turned on by default on creation time.
We have to jump out of the room, but thank you so much for attending and all the questions.